Breaking down the best games for 2023 right here at the Voice of College Football. Please like the video if you enjoy the content, even if you don't agree with me, and subscribe. And don't be too disgusted with me because this is not a top 10 list. It's a baker's dozen because I just couldn't decide. And I am fascinated with this first team, Colorado. They've got two nice non-conference opponents on September 2nd and the 9th. Primetime has brought in 25 transfers, including his son to play quarterback, and also former five-star cornerback Travis Hunter puts him on the other side of the field as five-star cornerback Cormani McClain. And the 21st rated recruiting class in the country, Colorado's best since 2003. And they take on last year's Cinderella team in week one. That would be TCU, of course, in Dallas. Then they come back home and take on Nebraska and Matt Rule, trying to revamp and revise and restore the tradition, the program, the success at Nebraska. Our first two games, Colorado taking on TCU and Nebraska. Now we go to number 10, Ole Miss at Tulane, and these two teams finished at much different places at the end of last season. Tulane, of course, the story of the group of five. They were the team that repped the group of five, won the Cotton Bowl over USC in dramatic fashion to finish off a 12-2 season, coming back from 2-10. And they got Michael Pratt back at quarterback, 27 touchdowns, 5 picks. He's got a couple of good threats in Lawrence Keys and Jaquan Jackson. Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss, who do they start at quarterback? They've got the incoming transfer, Spencer Sanders from Oklahoma State. He's amassed 11,000 yards and 85 touchdowns, although he can be sporadic. There's no question about that. Then we've got Walker Howard from LSU, a high-priced recruit at one point, and his 2022 quarterback, Jackson Dart. It's Ole Miss, it's Tulane. They get together in New Orleans on September 9th. Game number 9, first game of the season, September 2nd in Charlotte, North Carolina, South Carolina. I love this series. The last time the two got together was Sam Howell's first game at Carolina and his coming out party with 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter to pull it out against the Gamecocks. We've got, of course, a North Carolina team led by Heisman Trophy candidate Drake May, taking on Spencer Rattler, who had a marginal, mediocre, pretty bad 2022 until those magical games against Clemson and Tennessee, and then on into the bowl game, losing to Notre Dame, but a ton of points on the board for the Gamecocks, and they bring back Juice Wells, of course, at wide receiver. And how about the five-star? Possibly could be factor in Nicholas Harbor. We've got Cedric Gray leading a North Carolina defense that has to get better. He racked up 145 tackles last season. It's May, it's Rattler, it's North Carolina, it's South Carolina. It's on September 2nd in Charlotte. Our 8th game on our top 10 list is Minnesota and North Carolina in Chapel Hill. Rare, good non-conference game for PJ Fleck. And what a 3-season stretch he has put together in terms of 3 full seasons, 11-2, 9-4, 9-4, but he loses his best running back and one of the best in the history of the Big Ten, Mo Ibrahim. Minnesota can play defense, though. They take on Drake May. We just mentioned May. He's a Heisman Trophy candidate, had a phenomenal year with 45 total touchdowns, although he faltered late just like Carolina did in losing 4 straight down the stretch. This is Minnesota's best non-conference game since taking on TCU in 2014. We got Minnesota going south to take on Carolina on September 16th. On to game number 7. It's a rematch from last season. Florida at Utah. This is the first time the Gators have traveled outside of the Sunshine State for a non-conference game, away game, since 1991 against Syracuse. And Utah has not lost a home non-conference game since 2010. All right, we know what happened at the Swamp. The Gators eventually went 6-7, but they got off to a great start, defeating a top 10 Utah team at the finish. Anthony Richardson had a big game with 100 yards rushing and 3 touchdowns, but he's gone to the NFL draft. And, of course, probably a top 10 pick. Now Billy Napier's got a much different style quarterback, most likely in play with Graham Mertz, the former 5-star from Wisconsin. Cam Rising wants to make amends for the mistake he made at the goal line that cost the game. Utah, this time hosting Florida. It's game number 7 on our list. On November 4th, we've got Notre Dame and Clemson. And, of course, the Irish took it to the Tigers 35-14 last year. Clemson needs to look the part in non-conference play after a dismal 0-3 against South Carolina, Notre Dame, and Tennessee last year. Cade Klubnik faced the Irish for one pass. He got thrown in when the game was getting out of hand in relief of DJ Uiagalelei, and he threw a pick down near the goal line, backed up near his own goal post. And, it was just a rough night for Clemson. They will try to make amends in Death Valley against a quarterback, Sam Hartman, that they know very well, facing him every year at Wake Forest. And Sam Hartman ripped up that same Clemson defense for 6 touchdown passes in a 51-45 double overtime thriller last season. It's Notre Dame, it's Clemson on November 4th, with Notre Dame riding a 28-game regular season winning streak against the ACC. On to game number 5, and we stay with the Clemson Tigers, this time taking on South Carolina. What a swing in the series we have seen in recent years. All right, Clemson upset by the Gamecocks in 2022, 31-30, after they had won 8 straight in the series and completely thrashed and dominated South Carolina. The Gamecocks won 5 straight before that, but of course Clemson has owned the state, they've owned the ACC, but now being challenged on both fronts. It's Clemson and South Carolina on Thanksgiving weekend. Now we move on to game number 4, and it's the finest cross-sectional rivalry in all of college football. It is a sterling matchup. This is college football elite grandeur. It's Notre Dame hosting USC. It's Lincoln Riley, Marcus Freeman, part 2. This time, Marcus Freeman should have a better quarterback in play. Sorry, Drew Pine, in Sam Hartman. And he will be facing a USC pass defense that was 124th in the nation, 100th in pass efficiency. Caleb Williams tore up the Irish last year in a 38-21 win en route to a Pac-12 championship game appearance, of course, the next week. USC Notre Dame get together in mid-October in South Bend. Now our final 3 games are all rematches from home-and-home series started last season. And game number 3, at this point last year, was really a wild card kind of game from a couple programs where we didn't know exactly where they were. Some talent in some spots, but definitely coming off rough seasons, 5-7 at Florida State, 6-7 for LSU. But Brian Kelly came down to the Bayou and corrected things and won an SEC Western Division championship. But he dropped that first game on a missed extra point at the gun. They go 99 yards at the end as LSU to seemingly tie the game. Then they missed the PAT. And, of course, Florida State and Mike Norvell escaped. And Norvell and Florida State, that could have been the turning point, coming off 3 losing seasons, to get things back on track in Tallahassee. And, of course, Florida State then rolled on to 10 wins, 6 straight to close out the season. This looks like a big affair. It was a 1-point game last year in New Orleans. It could be a 1-point affair this time in Orlando, but mean a whole lot more from 2 better football teams. Jaden Daniels back on the field for LSU against Jordan Travis, same 2 coaches and quarterbacks. LSU goes to Orlando to take on Florida State, our game number 3. All right, on to game number 2. And Ohio State has defeated Notre Dame 5 consecutive times. They last went to South Bend in 1996, and they won that game. Now it's the Irish and the Buckeyes getting together for a second consecutive year after Ohio State won that game last year in Columbus, 21-10. They will not see Tyler Buckner at quarterback. They most likely will see Sam Hartman, but, of course, Buckner's still in play. He's still battling for the job. He's stuck around to take on Sam Hartman. Of course, whoever wins the job for Notre Dame is going to be taking on a Buckeye defense that was stout, that was strong for the most part last season, but still suspect in the secondary. Ohio State's also got a revamped offensive line that's going to have to take on what is always a strong Notre Dame defensive front. Kyle McCord is expected to win the starting job at Ohio State. This is going to be week 4, so that's key for the Buckeyes. He's going to have 3 games to work with all those weapons, get acclimated, get comfortable, and be ready to go to South Bend and take on a hostile crowd and a tough Notre Dame defense. It's September 23rd, and it's our game number 2, Ohio State at Notre Dame. Now game number 1. And if it's anything close to what these 2 teams produced in 22 in Austin, it will be a fabulous affair. Texas goes to Tuscaloosa to take on the Tide. Steve Sarkisian against his old boss, Nick Saban. Texas outplayed Alabama last year. They should have won that game. Quinn Ewers tore up the Tide in the first quarter. Then he got knocked out of the game. Hudson Card came in with bad ankle and all. He still had Texas in the lead before a late drive by Bryce Young and company and a last-second field goal after a whiff sack off the corner from Texas. All right, so Texas goes to Tuscaloosa this time, and Alabama's got some question marks. They lose, of course, the aforementioned Bryce Young, Heisman Trophy winner, best pass rusher in college football, Will Anderson, Henry To'oTo'o at linebacker. Jalen Milroe, if he wins the job, has to be better than what we saw in the auditions against Texas A&M and Arkansas. Maybe the starting quarterback will be Ty Simpson. First time Bama has been uncertain about the quarterback position since 2016. All right, our number one game, Texas goes to Bama to take on the Tide. All right, our top 10 list looks like this. The aforementioned Texas-Bama game at number 1, Ohio State Notre Dame at number 2, LSU Florida State in Orlando is number 3. Our fourth best game, USC Notre Dame. It's always a classic matchup, no doubt. Clemson South Carolina at number 5, Notre Dame Clemson at 6. We've got Florida Utah at 7, Minnesota North Carolina at 8. Then we've got at number 9, North Carolina South Carolina in Charlotte, followed by Ole Miss and Tulane. And of course, we love the two Colorado matchups against TCU and Nebraska to start off Primetime's tenure in Boulder. Your thoughts below. We want to hear from you. Where did we miss it? What games could we have included? We're also going to come back with our under-the-radar games for 2023. So stay tuned for that right here at the Voice of College Football.